So welcome back from the break. Now we will continue and talking about Agentic Engineering, commonly called vibe coding, which is using LLMs for coding tasks. I hope you had a nice break. So, as I briefly mentioned before, you can think about software 3.0, what's happening now, with software 1.0 being traditional coding, like you have a problem and you write code to solve the problem. And in that sense, you can also think about what coding actually is, and it is logic, right? So if you discuss how to code with a philosopher who has researched logic, he will understand you because it's basic logic, right? So you're implementing logic in software, right? And software 2.0 is training a machine learning model to do something, right? Classify something or other things, right? And these can be very complex systems like LLMs, but it's basically you are using data to train a model that can do something that could have been done with software. And software 3.0 is prompting a machine learning model through text to make software, right? So it sort of shifts this together because of course you can do it to train models or write code, but you can think about these different paradigms as they're all sort of living together. And sort of an AI engineer, or the way we're working today, is that you're sort of working in these different paradigms. Sometimes you code by hand, sometimes you train a model, sometimes you use AI for solving things. And it sort of depends on how granular you are in your control, right? Some things are more important than other things, and where you want to focus your attention. And people sort of talk about prompting as this sort of technique. You could prompt a model, but you think about that the prompting is based on what you understand, right? So the more you understand about how software works, the internet, and sort of fundamental things about how to build good software, the better you will be at prompting, even though you don't write the code. But however, like as you might have noticed, these systems become better and better and all autonomous, right? So they can do things for a longer time. So you can specify, build me a data set that contains XYZ, and today a model can work on that for 1 or even several hours, right? So it becomes more and more that these systems can do things themselves, right? And I hope you guys know who Andrew Karpathy is. Otherwise, I would recommend you to look him up. He's probably the world's greatest AI developer and teacher, and he has made a lot of good lectures on YouTube about how to understand LLMs and other things. And it's also famous for coining the term vibe coding, meaning a process when you're coding, but you're sort of not looking at the code, you're sort of letting the AI take care of it, and you're sort of like, oh, see where this is going. And this term has become very popular, and also sort of the concept of just like let the AI do the work in a way. And in this sense, depending on how good the model is, this can be a good or bad idea. And as models improve, this becomes more and more useful, right? And you can think about this sort of as in the terms of data quality. If you're a novice or sort of a new person per program, you will write code in this way, and if you're doing it for longer, you might have better code quality. And the only question that's basically relevant is how good is the code quality, right? And if the AI system can write better code quality than you, then in some sense, even though it might be nice to code, it might make sense to, for at least for this thing, make the AI do the coding. And since these systems have been trained on all the code that exists and know all the languages, they are quite good at doing it, even though they of course make mistakes. And some prominent people are sort of saying this, that we're not going to go back, that this is sort of the end of humans writing code. So for instance, this is Ryan Dahl, who made Node.js, which is sort of the system for running JavaScript on the backend, which is sort of a big deal. And he doesn't write code. Linus Torvalds, who famously made Linux, is also sort of trying out vibe coding and trying this out. Spotify is saying that their best developers don't write any code. So I think it's important to understand that this shift is happening, and that there are people who are sort of not coding in traditional sense. And I think at least that you want to try this out and see how it works for you, because it is a different way of working. And sort of a caveat or point of that is sort of like being a software developer, sort of building software, it's not about coding, right? It's about some way you sort of provide some value, right? And it's not how fast you type, right? It's sort of like, how can you make good systems, right? So there's a lot of knowledge that is needed in order to do that is not related to the syntax of a language, right? So even if the AI writes all the code, there's plenty of things you need to do. And sort of from experience, you can see that people who are sort of vibe coding or building these systems, the most complex system, sort of the best sort of vibe coded solution, usually comes from people who had more than 10 or 20 decades of experience working, building real systems and coding. So it's not that you are wasting time learning to code or understanding things, because you're understanding the fundamentals of these systems, and that will make you better at doing this, even if you're letting an AI write some of the code. So it's very complementary, and we can see that the best sort of vibe coders are usually people who have been writing code for a really long time. So I think like both these things are important, to sort of understand the syntax of language and understand how it works, but also to understand that you can use AI to be productive in some way. And there are many tools for this sort of vibe coding, agentic engineering. And they sort of rely on, you have an AI that sort of writes the code and you sort of review it, right? And of course, how well you are at reviewing this sort of depends on your experience of software, right? So you might not be able to review a language you don't understand or some things, right? But I would say that I think it's a great time now to try these tools if you haven't already. And going forward for this course, I will assume that you use these tools, right? And for some of the assignments, they will be hard to do if you're not using AI tools. You're not forced to use it, I'm saying, but you can use them, right? And it's important to understand that at the end of the day, you need to be honest with yourself. What are you learning, right? Because of course you can make an assignment and you tell Claude Code or some other tool, oh, write my assignment, right? But if you're not learning anything, then what's the point, right? So think about this, and I think sometimes you can make it so you let your system run something and try something out, but then you see like, okay, what do I need to understand here? And sort of ask the system to help you learn more. And here I think it's sort of having clear thinking is paramount. Like starting out with a good idea usually works well. If you have a sort of mediocre idea or you don't really know, then the AI can help you out, but it's not going to be a good system. Right. So there are a bunch of tools, right? I think the most famous one would say is Claude Code from a company called Anthropic. There's Cursor, there's Lovable, which is sort of a web tool. OpenAI has a tool called Codex. Google has a tool called Anti-Gravity. And I think it's here up to you. Some are free, some you have to pay a bit. I think Anti-Gravity is free. Codex is free if you... and there's a tool for desktop. And Lovable, I think, is free. Yeah. And in regarding prompting, you can think that what you're actually doing with prompting is you're focusing the attention of the model from, it knows everything, but you have to be sort of specific what you want. And if you're not being specific, the AI is going to choose for you, right? So it's usually better to have a longer prompt and know more, like, what do you know about the problem you're solving? Let's say you want to build a data set, then okay, I know I have a model build data set, I know this format, all this stuff, right? And if you don't specify it, it's going to be vague and the model is going to decide for you. So the better you understand the problem, the more knowledge you have, the better you are at doing this. And this is going to continue to be true. So it's not like AI is going to be able to solve all the problems. You need knowledge in order to sort of prompt it or sort of help steer these systems. And the more you know, the better you can be at doing this. Right. But there is, of course, a dark side to this tool. And I think it is important to think about that. Like, if you're using these tools a lot, especially if you're new to programming, you might not feel that, maybe I don't want to learn how to program and write in the system by hand, right? And for all of us who got started before, this was never an issue because you couldn't do that, right? So even if me personally, I can use these tools a lot, I have coded for many, many years, right? So I have this sort of background of understanding the syntax. That being said, when you use this tool, you can think of it that you might actually lose some skill, right? And you might feel really productive. But you should be careful to think like, what are you learning and what are you doing, so you see that you're actually making progress in your knowledge, right? Not just making sure that the AI writes something. Because at the end of the day, what's important is what you know. And another sort of concrete thing is it's very nice to write a lot of tests and be very thorough in your coding if you're using this tool. And of course, you can help the model by saying like, we should have tests and all this stuff, and think about this. That is much more important when you're not writing it yourself to make sure that the quality is good. Otherwise, it's not going to work well. So another idea is sort of thinking about sort of modular code, and a modular code is code that does one thing, but it sort of depends on that. It's sort of a key principle in programming, that you make something modular. It does one thing and only that thing. And this can connect to other things. And it's a very nice way to do it when you're writing things. Because you can make a tool, and other tools can write to that tool, but it's modular in itself. It doesn't connect to something else. And if you break out software that way, I think you can make better software. But I think another thing you have to say sort of in the side of these tools is that when you're building something, you're naturally learning. And building something is not the same as sort of understanding theory or something, right? When you actually build out something, there might be minor details. Let's say you're building something in Python. Okay, you need this Python version for this package, you need these things, something didn't work, you have to tune some parameter. And all these details is sometimes too much to sort of explain in theory, but you will all learn these sort of details when you are building, even if you're using these AI tools. So I think there is a key thing you can learn through building. And I like this sort of Feynman quote of what I cannot create, I do not understand. And the question is that if the AI builds it, are you building it? But at least you're sort of learning something about creation and sort of building when you're using these tools. Because you say, okay, this is how the process works, these are the steps, how is this working? So I would say that from my experience, people who are using these tools a lot learn a lot about different things, because they can sort of help you not get stuck. Because getting stuck is usually a problem when you program, that you get stuck somewhere. And I talked a bit, one thing is sort of talking about slop and sort of low quality AI content. And of course, right now, there's a lot of that. People are sort of building and happening in other domains. And we all sort of make this content. And the goal is to think about like, how can we make this into high quality software, right? And I would say that clear thinking and having a high quality context for AI agent is how to sort of make it so it just isn't some random thing or so something high quality. So if you start by thinking, what is the best idea I have, right? Like, how can you think about good ideas and how can you practice that ability? Because that will always be a bottleneck. Then you can use your good ideas, and then you can sort of use AI tools to sort of help you move forward with those ideas. Right, so now there's a challenge for you. And here you're going to create anything you want. You can use these tools and you can create anything you want. And the goal is just to get familiar. So this doesn't have to do with the course. I just want you to try something. And what can be surprising is knowing the limit of the tool, right? What can you do? What can't you do? How does it work, right? So try out some tool and see what happens, and sort of play around with it and see what happens. And here's some reading about things I talked about in the lecture. I also going to give you an additional assignment. And I want you to write a one-page essay where you predict how AI capabilities will evolve in 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, and in 10 years. And I'm not interested in the prediction made by AI models, right? I don't want you to use ChatGPT or something for this. I want you to sit there and think, how will it look like in 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years? And then we can talk about this in the next lecture. There's no wrong answer here, but I want you to think about this. Realistically, how will things look? All right. Thanks for listening. Next time, we'll talk about embedding models and BERT, and sort of like how we can use these models in software. Okay, thanks for listening.